What's your story?
Well, when I was in my 20s, I read the book Chesapeake by Mishner, and I fell in love with it. Fast forward 20 years or so, and my parents, who were working and living in Fairfax, went to Ocean City for the weekend, and they stopped by St. Michael's on the way to have lunch. Happens a lot. And they bought a house. And they also got two dogs at the shelter on the way home. So they called me and said, well, we've had a big weekend. And I said, oh boy. And they said, well, we bought a house and we got two dogs. And but when they told me it was St. Michael's, I was really excited because I'd never been here. I just knew about it from the book. And so I don't know, 2 or 3 years later, I was able to buy a house here. And my mom was very active she was the school board president, president of the library. And when I would go to lunch with her, it would be like being with a movie star. It's like, oh, Miss Donna, I'm so happy that you got laptops in the schools. And so, it was just natural for me to end up here, full time. My second retirement, I was just retired from the health department, and I had an opportunity to go and be to help them transition out of COVID during as the emergency was winding down. And so as deputy health officer, I really learned a lot about Talbot County and, the challenges that people face that, you wouldn't ordinarily see if you're just, hanging out in St. Michael's or, being just your little world. And, I've been a public servant my whole life. And it just seemed to me that, it's in my DNA. And, at the same time, um, I served as a housing commissioner, and I really enjoyed that and got to know and understand the housing issues and low income problems. I also was an elections judge for the 2020 election and 2022. So I've seen some of the political changes that have happened in this town and kind of what's behind some of it. And then I recently was appointed to the library board, following in my mother's footsteps, and also the elections advisory committee for St. Michael's. So I'm deeply involved in the town in many different ways, the county as well. And it just seems to me that the logical thing was, I'm retired, what am I going to do? And thought, well, maybe I'll run for commissioner. And I asked a couple honest people, and they said, oh, of course, it's a no-brainer. So here I am.
Was there a tipping point though? Was there a issue that you were following that you felt could have gone a different way, or was there other motivating factors? Because
what I really wanted to do, and I started this in 2020 or 2019, is I wanted to be on the planning commission because I knew what an important role that plays in, what happens in the town, what the town looks like. A lot of ordinances are generated out of that office. And I have applied 3 times to be on the planning board, and they've either given it to their next door neighbor after interviewing me, or somebody who doesn't really have any planning background. We haven't talked about my skills, but I have quite a bag of skills that are, particularly relevant to local government.
Well, let me get into 3 or 4 questions that have come up with all the candidates, and then we could talk a little bit about those skills a bit. I do notice a couple of things that I've asked people about, and the first one is this growing feeling that the town has different points of view about its future. One group feels like this town has grown out of being the quaint town we know, and we want to kind of control growth. And then there are those who say that this town is a tourist community that needs to continue to thrive. And, so I'm wondering where you are on that spectrum.
I kind of think of that as a bit of a false narrative, because I'm a community person, and I believe in community interaction and community decision-making forums where you bring groups together, and the people who have a strong voice, the people who don't have a strong voice, and the different stakeholders, and you have a community dialogue. And I couldn't agree more that, St. Michael's is really struggling with, what are we? And what do we want to be? And, where have we come from? And I think we've lost, we've gotten so wrapped up in complaining about different groups and not thinking, well, where can we be? And who can we benefit in the community? And I think everyone can have an opportunity to benefit if you can create a shared vision for where the town wants to go. And then you mobilize people behind that vision, get them involved in doing specific things that help the town.
The other thing that has come up more recently has been this discussion about whether or not the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum should be investing more, contributing more to the cost of running the town. Many friends of the museum, of course, say they are contributing more than amply. Another group that feels that that's not enough, that there needs to be more equity in what the museum contributes. Where are you on that?
Well, I had the good fortune to spend time with the leadership at the Maritime Museum, and lengthy conversations. And my feeling is it's not just the Maritime Museum. The town has lost its way in terms of partnership. It's had this attitude of, we're going to do it alone, and we can't. Some of our strongest allies those relationships need to be restored and opened up, where, the Maritime Museum could host community events for locals that, would make them feel more included, for example. And, these partnerships are really, really important, because when you generate revenue using grants, you have to have matching funds or in kind. And I actually talked to them about that. And I said, you're applying for grants, we're applying for grants, and can't we share our in kind capabilities to help support the grants?
Yeah.
I also talked to Patrick at the community center. And I've talked to some county officials, and, there's a really, really important partnership that we can have that will benefit everyone. And I think the Maritime Museum and the residents, they need to have more opportunities for engagement and begin to understand each other better. And I think it's there. I told them that if I get elected, I'm going to have them on speed dial, and that's going to be my second task when I get sworn in, is to get them on the phone and start organizing and restoring these partnerships.
Yeah. Lastly, the other things we've been covering in Oxford and now in Cambridge to a certain degree is the issue of transparency, and whether or not candidates feel that St. Michael's is doing well in that department. Are there issues that need to be addressed with that in that regard?
Well, my overall goal is accountable and effective government operations, not just government, but government operations. I think there's always room for improvement. I think in St. Michael's, there's room for a great deal of improvement. And the people need to understand how decisions are made, and some commissioners don't know how decisions get made. Well, so I have a few ideas. One idea immediately would be to appoint a commissioner to provide oversight to the different subcommissions, like planning and parks and recs. Because right now they operate independently and there isn't any coordination of effort until it comes time for budget discussions. So that would provide one form of accountability. Another form of accountability, and I don't know whether this is going to work, it's a cultural change, is there's no reason that commissioners can't just have all their meetings in public as they plan, as they argue, as they discuss, have it open to the public, make them working groups, and the public can come if they want. You know, it's sometimes it's not pretty. You know, in government, we call it making the sausage. It's, you know, the sausage tastes great, but if you saw what goes into it, it's sometimes not so pretty. And I would really like to see this, and I'm starting to you know, discuss this idea with the, you know, with the two city commissioners. And, you know, I think it would be a way to really open up operations, you know, of government decision-making.
This has been really helpful. I wondered, going back to what you believe you're bringing to the table in terms of this job and some of your aspirations if you do get elected.
Well, what I bring, and I'm a little different than the other candidates, is I have over 30 years of government employment and service at the federal, state, and local levels in Virginia, in Fairfax County, Loudoun County, in Maryland, and state and local government, and you know, at the Pentagon and the State Department. So I have a broad range of government experience. I also have a PhD in public administration and have taught graduate and undergraduate students about how government needs to work. So as a combination of the, you know, the education and the experience, I have grant writing skills. I know how to manage grants. I also have public financial management skills. I've managed very hundreds of millions of dollars worth of budgets. And I also have consensus building skills. And you asked me about my aspirations. You know, there's an interesting saying that if we can sit together, we can dream together. My imagination just starts to go crazy, you know, thinking about that. And it's so true. You know, I want to, you know, once I get to know the lay of the land, you know, with, you know, the county, I mean, sorry, the local employees, and also with, you know, all the initiatives that are going on, then, you know, I would work on mending fences. You know, and I talked about that, putting, you know, some of these people on speed dial. I'd also like to have a revenue generation task force, which would bring, we have a lot of skills here in St. Michael's among, you know, people who live here. And to create a very small task force of people who have these skills and can begin to discuss and come up with alternatives to some of the current funding, you know, streams that we now use. And I think that, you know, we have to talk about safety. You know, I volunteered to get a can of paint and paint the crosswalks. They don't want to repaint them because they're going to, you know, get the road paved through St. Michael's, you know, in the fall. And I'm like, well, so what? You know, I'll roll up my sleeves and go out there and do that. It's no big deal. I've got, you know, I can get white paint. So you know, so these are some of the things that I think about. I think about you know, like a beautification, community-driven beautification, you know, replace those old ugly signs at the entrance that have been there for 30 or 40 years with something that's a little more, you know, inviting. I don't know what's going on with the houses that are falling down and the truck that's sitting there that's got grass growing in it. You know, I think something needs a discussion about what's that all about.
Yeah.
Because when you come into town, it's kind of like, wait a minute, I'm not sure. I think I'll turn around. This looks kind of weird. So, and I also threw out the idea of reviving Fremont Street. I went to a conversation at the library where the old timers that used to hang out on Fremont Street talked about what it was like. And it so captured my imagination that I was just like, oh my gosh, it would be so cool to have a pool hall, show movies at the library. How do you do this? Well, there would be a lot of hard work. But, I think if people have a vision, they can get excited and then they want to get involved because they want to help, fulfill that vision.
Well, Alexis, this has been terrific. Thank you so much.